And let's talk about these two. Jackie and David are their names. Jackie and David Siegel. So this movie was made in 2013, but the scenes that we were seeing were filmed in 2007. Well, the movie was released in 2013, but it was basically filmed 2007, 2008. What happened in 2008, by the way? Yeah, so this movie is about how the recession affects David and Jackie. Let's talk about that in a minute. But first, let's start with this idea of the American dream. Do you think that this couple is representative of this ideal of the American dream? Max?
I don't think that they are.
Okay.
The American dream is about like working hard to get financial success.
Okay.
But the man says he worked hard, but he had to have owned that land first before he could make it a timeshare.
All right.
And he just built houses on it like it was nothing. So he had to have money originally to be able to do that.
Yeah, good. So there's something about, and David Siegel does come from some money, not as much as he ended up amassing, but there's something about inheritance then that feels like anti-American dream. Because if your success is dependent on working hard, but a certain part of your success was not from working hard, then that just feels a little bit lucky rather than just success. Okay. So he might claim that he worked hard, but that seems to be subjective. And when we look from the outside, it's like, but he had the orange grove. How did he have this orange grove if he worked so hard? Bailey?
I don't think it also would be because like the American dream is kind of like becoming rich and like having money and being comfortable.
Good.
And that was what he did. Like they literally had so much stuff that they had to get a new house. Like he had so much wealth.
Yeah.
That he felt like he could like spend it.
Good. And so there's a few things going on here. There is what is called conspicuous consumption. Conspicuous consumption is when you're not just spending money, but you're spending money in a way that everyone else can see that you're spending money, right? So it's like, I might be totally comfortable in my Toyota Corolla. I don't like cars, and so I don't really care. That's a nice car. It's not the cheapest car, right? But I don't really care that anybody, sees me driving in this car that is very functional for me. But let's say I don't even care about cars. All I need to do is get from home to work. But I buy, what's a nice car? Rolls Royce, is that something? A Jaguar? I don't know anything about cars. But if I bought a Rolls Royce to come to my job so that everyone can see, not that I like cars, but that I'm rich, that's conspicuous consumption. You're showing off not just the things you like, but just you're showing off that you spent money. And that seems to be something that seems like the American dream because it's about this mobility. You're demonstrating to people that there's this social, that you can gain and then you can spend. Dylan?
I think that they represent the American dream because it's not exactly how much money you have, it's how much money you have and then work where you want to be. That's the part where you work where you want to be. Like Donald Trump, for example, he got a small loan of $1 million.
14 million.
But now he's a billionaire.
Right, okay.
He works to where he wants to be. I think that's the example. You got to work where you want.
So it's regardless. So the important part of the American dream, and we talked about this, was that regardless of where you start from, right, you can get to where you want to be. So in that case, it's okay that, David Siegel started rich because he worked to get to where he wanted to be. Okay, got it? Yes.
I kind of also think that they're not part of the American dream because they're still chasing more. They're not where they want to be yet. And she's just constantly being like, oh, I want this, I want this, I want this. And he's just supplying that. And she's not really working for it. So they're not really working together for it.
Okay, so Jackie, not working for wealth. All right, I want to think about these two ideas now before we move on. So this idea of fulfillment we talked about a lot in that definition of the American dream, right? Does anyone want to respond to that idea of if they haven't fulfilled it, then it's not necessarily an example of that ideal? Ella?
I feel like it's not much of chasing what you want and working towards what you want to be. At that point, it's just greed and collecting things.
Okay.
So like you said earlier, showing it off, proving, oh, we are stable. We are rich. So at that point, it's overdoing it.
Okay, so from the outside, we look and we think, well, it's not possible that they're not fulfilled by this, right? So if they're going beyond this, then it's just an example now of greed, of just empty conspicuous consumption without any kind of end goal.
At that point, what they're chasing is not attainable by material things, what they're looking for is actually.
Okay, good. So it's like, no, because they aren't.
Because if you keep buying that much and you're still not feeling fulfilled, obviously material things aren't what you want.
Yeah, okay, good. So maybe then, this is kind of a little bit of a separate issue that we need to kind of think about. Let's think about this on the side while we're still pursuing this. Is the American dream a good thing or a bad thing? Admirable or not admirable? An ideal or kind of a nightmare? And I think Ella's kind of pointing us to this idea that maybe if the American dream is about is about social mobility, it's maybe not just such a thing that we should admire so much. But let's get back to that idea and stick with this idea over here. Ella, and then to Kim.
I was writing about how the ultra wealthy are somewhat of a danger to the American dream.
Okay.
Because he's talking about how he's controlling the election,
Yeah.
and it almost seems kind of like in Britain with the monarchy, like these people just inherit the wealth and they're not helping others, so they limit other people's mobility.
Okay. So it's more about then this kind of like competition and keeping people down. Does anyone want to argue that that's actually what makes it ideally the American dream? Kaylee?
It's kind of like social Darwinism. It's like
Okay.
if you're not like kind of monopolizing something, then you're gonna fall short.
Okay, good. So it's like you need to. I love the way that you said it. If you're not monopolizing something, then you're falling short. So that means that you've got to cut out everybody else, right, to monopolize the thing. So it's this kind of social Darwinism. So I think on this side, it could be that is both for the American dream and against the American dream, like that they're examples of it. Kenton, what were you gonna say about it?
Well, it comes down to your perspective on money, because if you're like really successful, you look at him, you're like, oh wow, he like did it, he's like all those dreams he did it, but like for anyone else, they're gonna be like, no, that's not what it means. It's like the idea of the American dream is like fluid compared to like what you want it to be.
Yes.
So like on this one side, like, no, that's not the American dream. But at the same time, it's like it is, because it just comes down to what you want to see the American dream as.
All right, so then we're going to say that it is under that definition, because if it's an achievement for them, and this is what they were seeking, competition, and they were seeking these things, and they had the opportunities and they seized those, then that counts as the American dream. Abby, what were you going to say?
So going back to the not fulfilled idea, it's strange because they do keep buying all of these things, but to a lot of people, fulfillment is having a big family or something. And they have 8 children, and then they buy this big house to separate them. So it's kind of like they don't want to be fulfilled.
Interesting. It seems like in that way, then wealth might be getting in the way.
If I want to do it.
Yeah.
You can't say which.
Which I think maybe is a sign that maybe he is fulfilled, because maybe this was the goal he wanted, was to have a bunch of kids, but not be able to see them. By the way, he's been married, I think 3 times, so he has 11 kids. I don't remember how many wives, but he has 11 total. So you'd have to be 12 with an adopted daughter. So 12 kids total. And so that maybe that's only possible if you have that goal of not being able to see them too often, right? Let's talk more about Jackie, because we've talked a lot about David. Jackie comes from more humbler circumstances, right? And then she works for IBM, and then she decides, you know what, this is not what I really like anymore, so I'm going to pursue modeling. And then she's like, you know what, this gives me a great opportunity. I'm going to pursue a rich husband. Why is that not the American dream? To me, it seems like, she set a goal, she worked towards it, she achieved that social mobility, right? Okay, Max.
Well, going back to what I said earlier, I mean, not many people can just quit their job and be fine. Like some people, if they try to, quit their job, quit their job and start modeling, I mean, they'd go poor, wouldn't they? Like,
yeah,
she must have been also rich initially, maybe not as rich as
Well, she wasn't actually, yeah, but she wasn't rich. She did come from lower middle class circumstances, but she was born with a face and a body that allowed her to become a model, right? And she probably, and we saw her, she worked towards that face and body, right? Like, she had to go through a lot to get that face and body. But initially, even with modeling, that has kind of been dependent on these outside circumstances that aren't about hard work, kind of maybe the same way that inheritance is. So if your opportunities are dependent on biology, then maybe we're not going to say that that's the American dream. But you guys said that when I was a basketball player, didn't we talk about this? That I want to be an NBA player, and you were like, well, you can try to be an NBA player, but yeah. So maybe she is capitalizing on her abilities and achievements. Maybe, Abby?
I actually think that she kind of did get the American dream.
Okay.
She did work for her wealth, and she got what she wanted. At first, she got the job she wanted as a mechanical something or other. And then when she didn't like that anymore, she got the job she wanted as a model because she worked for it to make sure that she had the right look, like she was thin enough or whatever. And then she worked to be the winner of that pageant, and then she got that, and then she married someone. When that didn't work out, she married someone else.
Right. Right. Now, why are we, I mean, I think some of us are resisting this. Over here, I put like, she's working with her sexuality. Like, that's kind of what she's capitalizing on, right? The opportunities that are afforded to her. Why does that make us feel a little icky, though, to say that Jackie is living the American dream? Because it does, right? I mean, we don't, at least I don't want to necessarily agree to that. Sadie, and then to Kennedy.
Well, I think like most of the resistance I feel to the situation is just how distasteful all of their wealth is. It's like egregious consumerism, and they like just it's pompous and gross.
Oh my gosh, you're so many good words. Hang on. Pompous, gross, what was it? Consumerism. What was it? Egregious. That's what it was. Oh my gosh.
It's just like
Such good word choices. Okay, keep going.
And I don't know, it's just like, okay, he had like orange land, how rich could he really have been?
Yeah.
So the American dream definition that I could go off of is like, so I'm not using my essay on it, but it's like equality of opportunity to reach your highest dreams or whatever. So, I mean, I feel like it has less to do with where you started and more to do with what you want and where you want to be.
Okay, good.
And so I feel like, they're the American dream, but do I think they're a tasteful version? Definitely not.
Okay,
And so,
awesome.
yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I'm gonna add another word to your list of like tone words for how we might feel about them. I feel like it's like kind of trashy, and tacky. Okay. Ella, what were you saying?
Going back to like his family, so I'm looking up the Wikipedia page. He's been married 3 times. Yeah, he has a ton of kids. And what I feel like with rich families is like their marriages never last, and sometimes their kids get into trouble. Like it said one of his kids overdosed.
That was the adopted kid. That's actually, they talk about it in the documentary. It's actually a story where their tackiness kind of goes away for a minute, and you're like, oh wow, no, they might be human after all. They adopted, I think it's her sister's kid, and her sister was a drug addict, and so they like took in this kid to try and help her. But anyway, keep going, because I'm sure the rest of their kids will turn out awful. So.
But like, I don't know. I feel like the American dream in this sense is very selfish.
Okay. So we're getting back over here.
By their families, but it seems like wealthier people are, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently the Trump family is pretty tight knit, but whatever.
Yeah, we can talk about that and how that kind of changes the landscape a little bit. But I think we're starting to fill out this over here. Kennedy, I never came back to you. Tell me what you were thinking.
I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like Jackie was gold digging when she
That was just you.
It's just.
Isn't gold digging though like? Isn't that a great example of capitalism?
I mean, if you can do it, go for it. Go for it. I
She worked where she wants to be, right? She saw the opportunity and she sees it. Here's an old guy.
I love people.
And he's rich. Okay, I'm gonna go Sarah and then through here with you guys. Okay.
But with Jackie, like going with the gold digging, like she went, like I would say she's not the American dream. Like she did like work to like get her modeling dreams and like all that. But when she like met, I forgot his name.
David.
Yeah, him. When she met him, like then she was working like gaining from his success and his work.
Okay.
And so I feel like it's kind of split. I don't know, but then also he was like if he inherited a lot, then he had people working for him. And so I feel like the American dream is working for yourself more than like having people working
Yes.
for you.
Okay. If the American dream is highly individual, right, then this idea of partnership and especially unequal partnership where you're kind of relying on somebody else, that's like kind of antithetical to the American dream. Bailey?
I think it also kind of shows like the difference between like men and women in the American dream.
Okay.
Men are taught to like get rich and women are taught to like marry a rich man. Like if you think about it, like that's kind of like what happens.
Yeah. I still had students, even just like 2 years ago, that her mom was like, you have to go to college. How else are you going to meet a husband? And I heard that when I was a kid. I just thought it was different. I thought the 15 years or whatever made a difference, but maybe not for everyone. There is this idea that, partly you go to college because you should improve yourself, and partly you should go to get, a husband, because that's a good place to meet a husband. And then the career side, like, not as important, right? It's good to have a backup though if you get divorced. That was always the information, that was always the message that was given to me. It was like, you need to go to college, get a career, because someday you don't know, you might end up on your own, right? But it wasn't like for independence version. So then we get over here, which is like, is it really her fault that, yes it is, but let's be generous to her. Is it totally her fault that she's in a position to be a gold digger? Maybe that's a little bit society's fault, a little
I'm
bit.
sure is there a abundant amount of wealthy women, like the roles were reversed, or is I don't know what the opposite of a patriarchy is, but
A matriarchy.
a matriarchy. So if it was a matriarchy, I'm sure a bunch of guys would take that opportunity.
Yes,
Richest woman in the world.
that's what cougar is half the time, right? Like she's just got a lot of money.
What a house husband?
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
A mimbo? Does that count?
Himbo.
A himbo? Oh, it's himbo now. Yeah, when I was little, it was mimbo. But yeah. Okay, Abby, yeah, you.
I think they're also very pretentious because they want to be seen as these wealthy people. And when they were talking about the house, you're like, this is the ballroom, all of our big black tie affairs. But it doesn't really seem like they're gonna, I don't know. It seems like I don't know what they would have black tie affairs for besides maybe Christmas. It doesn't seem like they're very giving and charitable.
So it seems like it's creating this attitude of
You're right.
displaying your wealth in ways that is like completely unnecessary too. Yeah. And that's what I love the word egregious up there. It's over the top, and it's also offensive in how over the top it is. Sadie?
Okay, so what I think is super funny about Jackie is that, like, I think a lot of people don't have respect for gold diggers, which I'm not necessarily saying that what she did was respectable.
Okay.
But it's like funny because she's like, yeah, I became like most people are like an engineer. She's smart. She's gonna do great things, and then she quit and became a gold digger. It's almost like she like tasted what was in the water and then was like, I'm good. I'm just gonna go be a gold digger. That's easier. And so it's like, okay, at least you like chose that. You didn't just pick a path you were told to do.
Yeah, so it kind of shows a kind of agency. So I'm going to put Jackie over here then. Jackie is kind of independent. She chose to business partner with a certain person, and there's a kind of independence to that decision. I feel like the older you get and the more you're in the workforce, the more you don't hate gold diggers. Men and women, you're just like, yeah, I get it. A little bit, I get it.
And the other thing I was gonna say is like, I feel like there's almost like a limit to the American dream because I feel like they've passed the threshold where it's like, they're getting to the point where they're so rich that, I mean, he said you could throw an election, which I feel like the American dream is to stay free, not to limit freedom.
Okay, so then we've got that's kind of in the bad and the good, depending on which side you fall on. It's either good or it's either bad because you reach this kind of limit and then it corrupts, right? But then it might be good because that is a sign then that it is actually achievable. Like it can be something that happens, and from that you can get a certain amount of power to sort of perpetuate the American dream for a certain subset of people. So it's both a bad thing and a good thing, depending if you're rich or not, I guess. Jenna?
I think that for him, Jackie is kind of a trophy wife because like when he was describing her, like obviously
he doesn't really know her.
Supposed to be really beautiful, but also he was talking about how many friends she has and how extroverted she was.
Yeah.
And how, because if you think about it, if your wife has friends, you're gonna be more likely to be able to sell to said friends.
Okay.
If she has all these rich friends, they might be looking to buy a timeshare, especially one of the more expensive timeshares.
Interesting.
So I think for him that she's more of a trophy wife, more of like a business idea.
Interesting.
Because she's a trophy wife because she's beautiful, but she has a lot of friends that can help him.
And even if it's not about timeshares, it's also about making social connections. I mean, it's kind of, we're reading Pride and Prejudice and they feel it right now. It is a marriage is a business proposition in a lot of ways. And so, but what's happening here is it kind of turns her then into this kind of object, right? Either a beautiful object or a business object, but either way, not a full person. And the way he talks about her, I do get the sense that he doesn't really know her that well. Like, she's a good person. That's such a vague thing to say about your wife. Like, not really very specific about her, right? And I love that he says, I don't know what she sees in me. That is the funniest line to me. Of course you do. You're 30, either he is delusional, like the audacity of white men or whatever. Either he is delusional being 75 years old and marrying someone 30 years younger than him, or that he just doesn't want to admit it on camera. Right? But he knows.
I feel like he was kind of like on purpose. I feel like he was like, I have no idea, and he's sitting on a throne.
Right, and he might just be making a joke, like he might be being sarcastic. He does actually know. But Ellen.
I was thinking about the agency that was mentioned.
Yeah.
And I feel like Jackie went on like one end of the spectrum, like all the way.
Mm-hmm.
But some people, like, they're not satisfied with their job. They were told to take this path to get fulfillment, and they're not fulfilled. And I think some people do different things with that than go off and become trophy wife. But, I was watching this like minimalist documentary, and it's so fascinating how people are like, change your mindset and see what you really value. And I think that's more than just like, oh, I'm gonna go chase after a bunch of money.
Okay, good. So it seems then that there's something, maybe the American dream then under this bad idea well, let's say under the good idea, it gives people a kind of goal. And under the bad idea, maybe it's a little overbearing. Maybe this idea that we have to be committed to social mobility is misplaced in the first place, but we can't escape it. We just feel like we have to. That idea of keeping up with the Joneses, if my neighbors get a trampoline, I have to get a trampoline or I'm going to be embarrassed. Trampoline was a weird one to go with that, but they get a hedge or something, then I better up my lawn game or else I'm going to be embarrassed. You're pulled into the thing and seem to not be able to escape. Yeah. Ella, and then to Abby.
It feels like a constant competition between everyone, trying to be the top dog.
Yeah.
And no one really feels okay with, I'm fine where I am now, and I don't feel like I need to go higher. I need this.
Right.
I'm just perfectly content with myself and where I'm at now.
Right. So the thing here is that fulfillment, maybe wealth is achievable. Fulfillment under this plan maybe seems impossible then, because if you're always being mobile, if that opportunity is always available for you, then there's always somewhere more to go. Matt. Oh, Abigail, and then to Max, and then Katie, Dylan, and then we're gonna cut the conversation.
I think because fulfillment is never possible, there's something very desirable about being a trophy wife, because you were able to gather all of that wealth and all of those things and just feel good about yourself because you're better than your neighbor, because you have this blessed life and you have a husband who loves you
Yeah.
and cherishes you, but really you're just something else. No.
But you don't have to go out and try to make more of it. You just get to watch somebody else do that. That does sound really nice.
So that's why I kind of admired Jackie's path, because she saw an opportunity to
Yeah.
capitalize off herself.
And capitalize off of patriarchy, which usually brings her down, right?
I feel like it's not her being, oh, she kind of just wanted to stop working. I think she saw it off because she is smart. She saw an opportunity for her to make money and be rich off the path of least resistance, which honestly is what we all want. More reward for less work.
So in that case, Jackie might be an example of the American dream, while David maybe not so much. Maybe Jackie is even more of an example of the American dream because she takes the path of least resistance, which I think goes over here to like, then do we admire the American dream? Okay, Max, Kennedy, Dylan, and then we're gonna cut. Yeah.
You know, I think like the thing about never being fulfilled, I think it goes back to like maybe even like primal things, because like you're always trying to, like when we were cavemen, we were always trying to get food, we were always trying to get water. There was not an idea of fulfillment.
Yes.
But now that we're in a society where that's possible, those instincts didn't go away, and so we're all just like, oh, get more, so we won't die. You know?
That's fascinating. That it's got this biological component to it, and I can see that there's something that is almost anti-life if you were to just say I'm content now. I don't need to pursue. No, Kennedy.
I was just gonna say that I feel like at some point, Jackie's like mindset turned into like it went from like personal dreams, like because she wanted to like live her life apparently, and then it changed into like greed, and now she's like, well, what do I do now?
Okay,
I'm
so
gonna build the biggest house in the United States, you know?
yeah, so maybe it does get to this point where it becomes, it's not immoral in the pursuit of it maybe, but it's immoral in the way that you execute it after you pursued it. I can see that. Dylan?
I don't think that the idea of fulfillment is really ever achievable to a point, unless you're just a very humble person. Like if you're gonna have a car for just your whole life, you're gonna want a new one eventually. That's not fulfillment. That you're not fulfilled yet. Then you're like, maybe I'm not happy with my relationship right now, I'm gonna want a different person. That doesn't necessarily relate to wealth at all. But like blaming them for not being fulfilled, maybe they just have more access, more things, which means that they're not fulfilled, like they're not observantly
Interesting.
fulfilled, but everybody's not necessarily fulfilled at all.
Interesting.
Like we'll always want, maybe I want more education, maybe I want more money, just like the obvious thing, but everybody I don't think is ever fulfilled.
Yeah.
I think that's almost like unachievable.
And maybe, and to go back to Max's point, maybe that is something about our biology, like we're sharks, we have to keep swimming or we die, you know, that idea. Okay, let's take this then and go back to Sadie's point then about tone here. Because in a lot of ways, it kind of felt like we sort of ended up over here in a lot of ways. Maybe not completely, but we kind of did say like, yeah, in some ways they do, you know, end up representing this American dream. Maybe the American dream is not as much of an ideal as we think it is, but they do seem to be, you know, acquiring and moving up and all of that. So let's just pretend then for a second that they do represent this American dream. And over here, though, we've got Sadie's like really good diatribe against them, them being distasteful and pompous and gross and egregious consumerism, right? Like we look at them and a part of you don't you say white trash? They're new money is what we would call them. They seem to not have any class. Even though they're part of an upper class, they don't have class. And so we look at them and everyone laughs at that couple, I think. I think that's the attitude. It's sort of like, well, I don't want that. Like, I don't want to be that gross. If I got wealth, I would want to be classy with it. You know, I wouldn't need to show it off in this way, right? I think they do, yeah. I think you get that when she references the black tie hair, you know? So if that's the case then, but then they are representative of the American dream, then what does that tell us about our country's value system? Like when we look at somebody like David and Jackie, or we look at somebody who has amassed a great amount of wealth, and we laugh at them and we say, I don't like that. But then we look at somebody who has, been wealthy for a very, very long time. Somebody like the Huntsmans, for example. We look at the Huntsman family and we're like, but that's classy. What does that tell us about whether or not we as a country actually do believe in the American dream and the value of the American dream? It's something I want you to consider. Things have gotten topsy-turvy with the Trump family, though. I said I was going to bring up the Trump family again. Things are weird with the Trump family because this movie felt like, to me, a very good representation of new wealth in 2012 when I watched it, and I was like, yeah, we think that those people are gross, right? Like, we do not admire them. But then things kind of switched around with Trump winning the election, and Trump's an interesting case because he acts like this idea of new money. He acts a lot like Jackie and David, right? I'm sure he's got a throne somewhere, but gold-plated stuff and like a lot of conspicuous consumption, showing off, like putting the big name out, like I am Trump, branding, that kind of stuff. But he's old money. His grandfather made money in, I don't know if you knew this, brothels. He owned brothels in Canada, Canadian brothels, no less. But that money was then passed on to Trump's father and then Trump. So it was a matter of inheritance. And if you look at how much money Trump's father had versus how much money Trump has, it's kind of comparable. Trump's been up and down quite a lot, but it's not like with David Siegel where he starts with an orange grove and goes to, David Siegel now is worth about 500 million, but at the time of this documentary, he was worth about $1 billion. So the recession. Recession happened, yeah. So that's kind of like an interesting case because then Trump comes into office and a certain population really does admire him for that American dream kind of conspicuous consumption. I'm still I don't think any of us really know what to do with that. Like, we don't know how that fits into history yet, or it fits into our ideals. We're still trying to figure that out. But historically, it has been that people who behave like Jackie and David are looked down upon no matter how much money they have. They still seem low class. They still seem like, I'm going to use really offensive terms, they still seem like trailer trash, even though they're billionaires, My husband was trailer trash, so I get to use that word, right? That's how it works. I have friends who are trailer trash. All right, so then I want to bring this back to Gatsby because I'm hoping you're seeing the connections here. Let's go to your books, pull out your books. And let's go to page 5. So there's 2 rich communities in this novel. They're suburbs. So there's 2 rich suburbs. There's the city, which is something else, but there are 2 rich suburbs. There's West Egg and there's East Egg. Gatsby and Nick live in West Egg. Daisy and Tom live in East Egg, and they have a very different feel to them. Now, it's not totally clear which one has the most money, like the actual assets. It's not really clear which one does, but one's more fashionable and one is less fashionable. So let's read through what he says about them. It says, I lived at West Egg, the less fashionable of the 2. Though this is a most superficial tag to express the bizarre and not a little sinister contrast between them. My house was at the very tip of the egg, only 50 yards from the Sound, and squeezed between 2 huge places that rented for $12,000 or $15,000 a season. The one on my right was a colossal affair by any standard. It was a factual imitation of some Hotel de Ville in Normandy, with a tower on one side, spanking new under a thin beard of raw ivy, and a marble swimming pool, and more than 40 acres of lawn and garden. So that's Gatsby's house. Let's talk here about Nick's tone towards West Egg. How is he describing West Egg that kind of signals his judgment of West Egg? What are some of the words he uses that give it a feel? Yeah, we go.
He says less fashionable.
Yeah. So what does the word fashionable mean?
Pleasing to the eye.
Pleasing to the eye. But different at certain periods, right? To be fashionable, it's like you are up to date, you're current, you are aesthetically pleasing for the year that you are in, right? That's a fashionable person. And he's saying that West Egg is the less fashionable of the two. So it's the less aesthetically pleasing. It's the less classy, quite honestly. It's the less classy version. And it's this house that he describes is colossal, a colossal affair. What does colossal mean? Enormous, big. Yeah, it's
Kind of like moving.
huge, looming. Good. It's got that negative connotation to it, right? Looming, monstrous a little bit. It's colossal. And it says that it's built in imitation of the Hotel de Ville in Normandy. This is kind of like imitation of Versailles. Why is that a little bit negative as well? To say it's limitation. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the Versailles building was like built off of the poor people in France's money.
Yes.
So it's like an uneven distribution of wealth that made the Palace of Versailles. Like if you find that it was like that, that would also imply that Gatsby is like not completely good wealth, like good wealth.
Absolutely, so astute. And something that we didn't talk about with the Queen of Versailles, which is his house is absolutely built on the backs of poor people, because he sells timeshares to people who most often people who buy timeshares can't afford it. And that kind of idea of renting property to people who can't afford it is what causes the recession in the first place, giving home loans to people who can't afford it. So this one is not about Versailles, it's the Hotel de Ville in Normandy, but it's a similar idea, which is based on something that was old wealth that depended on an aristocracy. Abby?
I also think it's kind of calling out that Gatsby is not very original. Like, he doesn't have his own ideas, he's copies of other people.
Good. So he's not making the fashion, he's trying to follow the fashion, and by doing that, you become less fashionable. Jenna?
That's what I was trying to say, but like saying that it's an imitation, it kind of makes it seem like less like pretty or like less good, not as good as the original.
Yeah,
When you say imitation, obviously like people say imitation is the like best form of flattery, but also it just means that you're not necessarily as good as the original.
Yeah, I think it's both those things. It's the less form of flattering, meaning that the thing that he's trying to copy is better than him. But he's desperately trying to live up to that thing by copying it, like some knockoff handbag or something. Yeah. And this is Gatsby's mansion, and it's got a pool, and it's got raw ivory. It says, it was Gatsby's mansion, or rather, as I didn't know Mr. Gatsby, it was a mansion, inhabited by a gentleman of the name. My own house was an eyesore, but it was a small eyesore, and it had been overlooked, so I had the view of the water, a partial view of my neighbor's lawn, and the consoling proximity of millionaires, all for $80 a month. I love that phrase. Why would the proximity of millionaires be consoling? Candy?
I think when you live next door to a mansion, it's easy to forget that you're not just like a millionaire.
Yeah, you live in the nice neighborhood, and so you feel like I'm with these people. I've been in that situation where I had an apartment in a nice neighborhood, and so you're just like, oh yeah, I'm one of you. I'm same, you know. But my apartment, the rent was very, very low. There's also, have you guys seen An Idiot Abroad? It's a TV show that's on Netflix. Anyone seen that? Okay, so Ricky Gervais, who's a comedian, he has a show called An Idiot Abroad where he sends his friend, who is an idiot, to travel to places that are hard to get to because his friend hates traveling, just hates it. So he's like, Ricky Gervais thinks it's very funny to send this idiot friend who hates traveling to these places that are hard to get. Anyway, so the guy goes to Petra, which is like an ancient ruins, and it's I don't even know if we'd call it ruins, but it's houses that were built into the rock in the Middle East. I think it's in Jordan. Pretty sure it's in Jordan. Anyway, there's some that are like beautiful. They're carved and they're ornate and they're amazing. These like palaces built out of rock. And then there are some that are just holes in the wall because it was a neighborhood and you lived where you lived. And the guy says that he would rather, they ask him, which one of these would you want to live in? Thinking he'd choose a palace, and he says, no, I want to live in the cave because then I don't have to worry about cleaning it and upkeep. But every day I get to go out the entrance to my cave and see a palace. And how nice is that? Like I get to enjoy the thing, but I don't have to worry about it. And I think that's kind of the idea of Nick. It's like I get to enjoy all this stuff. I get to watch, I get to like peep on my neighbors all the time and get involved in their rich people drama and all this stuff. But I don't have to worry about, you know, staying here. I think Nick is slumming it. Is that a term we still use? Slumming it. It's like a rich person who like goes to the bad neighborhood just to like see how the other half lives and enjoy how the other half lives. Enjoy. It's kind of an appropriation type idea. Enjoy their music and their food and all that stuff, and then you can go back to your rich neighborhood. Yeah. Okay, so that's Gatsby's house. Let's compare this to East Egg, which is where Tom and Daisy live. Across the Courtesy Bay, the white palaces of fashionable East Egg glittered along the water, and the history of the summer really begins on that evening. I drove over there to have dinner with the Tom Buchanans. Daisy was my second cousin once removed, and I know Tom in college. And just after the war, I spent 2 days with them in Chicago. Her husband, among various physical accomplishments, had been one of the most powerful ends that had ever played football at New Haven. A national figure in a way, one of those men who reached such an acute, limited excellence at 21 that everything afterwards savors of anticlimax. So he is that like dope adult that wishes they were back in college. He peaks too soon. His glory days are behind him. His family were enormously wealthy. Even in college, his freedom with money was a matter for reproach. But now he'd left Chicago and come east in a fashion that rather took your breath away. For instance, he brought down a string of polo ponies from Lake Forest. It was hard to realize that a man in my own generation was wealthy enough to do that. Why they came east, I don't know. They had spent a year in France for no particular reason, and then drifted here and there unrestfully, wherever people played polo and were rich together. This was a permanent move, said Daisy over the telephone, but I didn't believe it. I had no sight into Daisy's heart, but I felt that Tom would drift on forever seeking, a little wistfully for the dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable football game. So here he is over in East Egg, and the first glimpse we get of East Egg is that it glittered along the water, and it's covered in white palaces. Have you noticed how often the word white appears in this book? We'll look at another spot. It's all over the place, and from now on, look for the word white because it's everywhere. Not just with Tom's racism, which he wants everybody to be part of the great white race, right? But also in the other way we think of whiteness, not racial, but when it's not racial, what does whiteness usually represent? Actually, when it's racial too, but we don't need to get into that. Yeah, Ella.
Kind of like clean, purity, something higher, but we think of heaven, kind of white clouds and pearly gates. It's like that. It's almost like the top tier of what we're going for.
Yes.
It is the peak.
Yes, absolutely. Jenna.
I think also wealth. It's like kind of a signal of like wealth. Like especially in this time, because this is the time period where like white is starting to become more the fashion in clothing because like cleaning is getting easier. So that's why like white wedding dresses are starting to come into play. It's because it's easier to keep those clean.
Oh, I didn't know this.
I know way too much about fashion.
That's awesome.
And so basically, it's like this symbol of wealth, and it's been a symbol of wealth for so many years. And so it's just like clean, pure, and wealth.
Awesome. And with that, I think comes in an idea of innocence too, because if it can be clean, it's not soiled at all. You can't have white carpets unless you're very wealthy and have people to clean them, right? So it's a sign of wealth. And then what about all the moving around that they talk about? Drifting here and there, wherever people played polo. I love that. And we're rich enough, like rich together. What does that tell us about maybe the attitudes of people who live on East Egg? What kind of people are they? Their personalities or Max.
They're rich but never fulfilled.
Okay, yeah. So it's that idea that there's always something more to seek, right? There's also like something the rich can afford to not put down roots. Like the rich can flip from here to there and they don't need to worry about, I got into a mortgage and how do I pay it back? Kenton and then to Audrey.
Well, with like the white being pure, it's
Yeah.
kind of like ironic that Tom's living in a white house with like purity, but he's gonna go have multiple affairs.
Yeah.
Which like would not be pure and white, so like kind of like mocking it in a way. ideal pure house with like his wife that still stay loyal to him, but he's like completely opposite.
Yes, absolutely. They seem to be, their insides are not right at all. Even while they like are insisting that their outsides are. It's a hypocrisy of the rich, especially. Yeah. Audrey.
It's just like the fact that they can move around and kind of do as they please. It's just like they can afford to be finicky and just go with their whims.
Yeah, this whim idea. It's like I hate it. I hate this idea that you could just move from place to place, right? Because it not only shows that they're wealthy and that they can afford to move from place to place, but it also shows that they don't really care about the people that they are leaving behind from place to place, right? Like I could move, I have the money saved up where I could move, we could sell our house or whatever, but my best friend lives a half block away. And so I wouldn't want to move because I've been friends with her for 20 years and I don't want to like leave that root behind, right? It feels like a betrayal of her to leave. So this kind of shows their lack of connections to the real world too. And then I love when it first introduces the girls. Let's look at that part too on page 8. Because it turns what we're talking about wealth and flightiness, into something visual. So it says the only completely stationary object in the room was an enormous couch on which 2 young women were buoyed up as though upon an anchored balloon. So you get this image of stasis in the couch, wealth being secure and not going anywhere, this giant couch. But then you get the women on it, because their wealth is secure, they get to like float around on the couch. And it's buoyed up as though an anchored balloon. It's because they're wearing dresses and their dresses are rising and falling in the wind. So it looks like they're like ballooning, you know. They were both in white, and their dresses were rippling and fluttering as if they had just been blown back in after a short flight around the house. I must have stood for a few moments listening to the whip and snap of the curtains and the groan of a picture on the wall. Then there was a boom as Tom Buchanan shut the rear windows, and hot wind died out about the room. And the curtains and the rugs and the 2 young women ballooned slowly to the floor. So you've got like, once they're enclosed in this space, then they can be secure. But as soon as you open them up to the outside world, they can just fly around as they want. Okay, so that's old money. Let's compare then that to the party that Gatsby has, this awesome party, which is on page 40. And as I read this, like you can kind of hear the Queen of Versailles family in your head. At least once a fortnight, a corps of caterers came down with several hundred feet of canvas and enough colored lights to make a Christmas tree of Gatsby's enormous garden. On buffet tables garnished with glistening hors d'oeuvres, spiced baked hams, crowded against salads of harlequin designs and pastry pigs and turkeys bewitched to a dark gold. In the main hall, a bar with a real brass rail was set up and stocked with gins and liquors and with cordials so long forgotten that most of his female guests were too young to know one from another. By 7 o'clock, the orchestra has arrived, no thin 5-piece affair, but a whole pitful of oboes and trombones and saxophones and viols and cornets and piccolos. Notice how he has to repeat. He has to detail every single thing to show the excess. Where was I? And low and high drums. The last swimmers have come in from the beach now and are dressing upstairs. The cars from New York are parked 5 deep in the drive, and already the halls and salons and verandas are gaudy with primary colors. Gaudy is another word for tacky, excess. And hair shorn in strange new ways, flappers, and shawls beyond the dreams of Castile. The bar is in full swing, and floating rounds of cocktails permeate the garden outside until the air is alive with chatter and laughter and casual innuendo and introductions forgotten on the spot and enthusiastic meetings between women who never knew each other's names. So it's a sign of excess, and Nick keeps telling us every single thing that is at this party and every single thing that Gatsby owns. He wants to like really drive home. This guy has a lot of stuff, and he's acquiring a lot of stuff, and he's showing a lot of people a lot of stuff, you know? And yet, would you rather be at Gatsby's party, the gaudy, tacky, trashy, egregious consumption party, or would you rather be at Tom's dinner party where there's secret conversations about Tom having an affair and he comes in and tells you all his racist ideas? Gatsby's party, right? Like, I know I made that sound really bad, but like, even if it was just a regular dinner party, would you rather be at this little dinner party in a white kind of like stuffy house because they close the windows and it's a really hot day, or would you rather be getting rip roaring drunk? I know you wouldn't, but you know, watching a bunch of funny drunk people and dancing and eating really good food and going crazy. Gatsby's party sounds awesome. Yeah, Sadie.
The one thing I would say though is I feel like the way that Gatsby is portrayed in the book is not the same way that we perceive the Versailles people. So you can say that, but I don't think it's a direct comparison.
Ooh, okay.
He's like classy human.
Ah.
Because like they would be there talking to everybody at the party, and yet Gatsby's nowhere to be found. He's not there to absorb all their happiness.
Yeah. Although I will say there's some tackiness 1920s style at this party. So like it's full of Englishmen dotted about, all looking a little hungry and trying to make business deals. It's full of actresses with dyed hair, I assume Kardashian types, at this, you know, that are dyeing their hair, which is super tacky, you know. There is women who get so drunk that they are crying and trying to sing karaoke type of idea. So there's still tackiness. Maybe it's the idea though that we're romanticizing the tackiness of the 20s. Like by Tom and Daisy standards, Gatsby is the Jackie and David, right? By our standards, we're like the 1920s were so fancy. I'd love to go back there and, you know, participate in high culture. So maybe that's the disconnect, but totally fair, because you'd be exhausted by their party. I would still want to go to Jackie and David's party. Am I the only one? Would you guys like to go to their party?
I think it'd be good to watch it.
Exactly. And I think that's why Nick likes it, right? Like he's like, let me tell you about this lady. Let me tell you about this guy at the library. Like these people are nuts. Let me tell you about them. So yeah, it's like, it's a good time because it's so unpredictable and weird and crazy. But it's again, he's kind of like slumming it again. He and Jordan, I think. Okay. With that in mind, we have a couple minutes to do the next thing I want to do. So pull out your American Dream packets. And then I think it's page 11 is the Thomas Jefferson diary entry. It's not really a diary, but yeah. Have you never had one? Is anyone else never had one that I can give you one? Yes. Okay, I want you just to read that through. It's short. It's page 11 and 12. And as you're reading, I want you to think about what Jefferson believes about the aristocracy. Let me say this. Why he thinks the aristocracy is a problem, and then what he proposes to solve it. Needs more time to read, raise your hand. Okay, let me ask, what is his problem with the aristocracy in France, Max?
That there is such an inequality between the rich and the poor.
Yeah, so it's about inequality, right? And because the richer that the rich get, the more they take money from the bottom of that social structure, and so the poor get poorer, right? And that means that they're unemployed, and then the laborers aren't making a fair wage for a day's work. So what's his proposal for fixing it? Yeah, Sadie.
One of them was applicable to today's thing, was taxing the rich and not taxing the poor.
Yeah, you didn't know Jefferson was a Bernie bro, huh? He proposes not taxing the poor or even the middle class, and he wanted to have heavy taxes on the wealthy. What else did he say you could do to help stop this? There's one other important thing. He said you could break up land. So it's basically an estate tax, which Bernie is for as well. He said to tax estates or not allow estates to be passed on from one person to another, and instead break it up. And so there was a thing in France called an entailment at the time, where you had to pass it down to like the oldest son to keep that wealth intact. And Jefferson was saying, no, you gotta split it up among all the kids, because then they'll still be rich, but at least that wealth starts to split up as they have kids and they have kids, right? It gives people a chance to have to work towards something rather than just getting it all handed to them. So what I want you to do, you've got no time for this. We will come back and do this. Never mind. All right, let's clean the desk. Let's spray them down. You guys, we are done. If you have any questions here at the end, though, put them in the chat and I'll be right back. Answer this, please pick up. Thanks.
I did the BLM lit review in the Baldwin essay.
Okay, I haven't gone through late work for so I am Kind of tomorrow is my day for doing all of that and getting everything updated.
All right, I
So
just
it'll be
wanted
that
to
day.
make sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. If there's any confusion, I'll remind you or email you.
Okay.
Figure it out. Yes.
Also, I wanted to ask if you got my essay. I wasn't sure. Hospital Wi-Fi is not okay.
Which essay was
I think
it?
it was the American Dream essay.
Okay.
I wrote it on Friday.
That's right. Now I remember your email that I was supposed to check. Okay. I will check that while,
I can submit it right now.
and I will put in the extra credit so I don't forget. It was both Ellas that had extra credit. Oops, I forgot to press stop on our Zoom. So just